cool. And we're live, but not live. It's fine. It's been 84 years since our last Dune discussion. It feels like that, but it's been, I think, what, 2.5 years? Almost? Something like that?
It's been a while, yeah.
I
Since the
can't
last
remember
movie came out.
I know. Oh, God, yeah, finally. Anyways, so yes, we are here to just finally discuss Dune Part 2. I will leave a link down below for our discussion on Dune Part 1 if you haven't seen that. And, yeah. So, same group, but I will let you all introduce yourselves.
All right.
Directions, yes.
Hi, I am Joessica from Joanna Reads. And I'm really excited to talk about this movie today. And I guess that's about it.
All
So
right.
down below me, I guess.
Okay, yeah, I'm Philip Chase. I would actually be the worst mentat ever. but all the cool names were taken, so I had to go with mentat, I guess. But yeah, I have the YouTube channel Philip Chase.
And I'm John, an underling on House Atreides, and I don't have a channel. I just lurk around on Discord. I'm sure some of you have seen me on there.
And
ready to talk some Dune.
Yeah, and apparently the resident conversationalist when it comes to movie adaptations, because we also wrapped John in for The Green Knight,
Yep.
which was great discussion as well. I will also leave a link to that down below. Yeah, like I said, this is the Dune Part 2 film discussion. I guess, well, I don't know, if you're here, you've probably read the books. And if you're here, I assume you've also watched Part 1, so I guess we can immediately start into spoilers or general discussion, whatever. I don't care. There's no rhyme or reason here. How'd you all like the movie? Anyone can start. I don't care.
I'll go ahead and start because I have a couple of things I want to preface before going into the movie. One is that it's been a couple of years now. It's been a few years now since I've read Dune. I've read the book twice, but it's been a while. So I feel like I'm more distanced from the book than maybe somebody who's just read the book. Like Philip, I know that you're in some discussions right now about the book. So
yeah, but I didn't reread it. I read it at the same time you did before the first film.
But you're still probably closer to the material, talking through it in discussions with
that people. Has helped. That has helped me some, yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm more distanced from the source material going into the movie. And I feel like that has to make a difference into how I perceive what the quality of the adaptation being faithful or unfaithful. And the other thing I want to preface this with is that as I've gotten older, I will say that when I was younger, maybe I should say it this way. When I was younger, I was far more persnickety about whether an adaptation was faithful to the source material or not. I feel like I'm much more open-minded towards things being different, towards the changes that were made. I understand that there were a lot of changes made to the film. And so that doesn't bother me as much. I feel like going into it, I'm more there for what are we doing with the story? Are we at least bringing forth the spirit of the story, understanding that significant cuts had to be made, that there were some changes. And 3, I was very skeptical going into Dune 2 because I liked the first movie, but I wasn't the biggest fan either. I don't remember what I said in our first discussion, but I know the movie did not stay with me over time. When I heard news about the second movie coming out, I was just not that excited to see it, to be honest with you. I had a very unpopular opinion about Dune 1, which is that I didn't like the soundtrack. I liked the soundtrack, but I didn't really like it with the film. I felt like it kept pulling me out of the story with some of the choices that Hans Zimmer made, I guess. And I was also a little unsure about some of the casting decisions when I thought about it over time. And the movie totally surpassed my expectations. It blew my expectations out of the water. I loved the movie. I thoroughly loved the movie. And this is hard to say, but I think that there are some things in the movie that I think can be argued are better than the books. And that's hard to say for me because Dune happens to be, like I said, I'm a little further away from the source material, having not read it in a couple years, but it sticks out as one of my favorite books. So that's, I know, a bold statement, but I really love the movie that much.
Wow.
Joanna's already, shooting shots, calling me persnickety and stuff. So
I call myself persnickety, which I did used to be quite a bit.
I'm gonna be, spoiler alert for everyone. I am going to be the pain in the ass, and I'm going to be that one person on the internet that did not like this movie at all. So
You're not the only person. I'm sure you're speaking for a
everyone's
lot of
loving
people.
it. Everyone's like, "Oh my god, it's the best adaptation ever!" And I'm like, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Like,
You're not the
anyways,
only
sorry.
person. A lot of people have had some criticisms, and I think they're probably valid criticisms. I think there are things to criticize. Is it perfect? No. But as much as I love the original source material, as much as I love Dune for so many reasons, is it a perfect book? No. There are things to criticize, I think, on both ends. So
I guess before I, get, exercise those demons of getting the rants out of my system, I'll let the rest of you guys. What are your thoughts on the movie?
yeah, Philip, take it away.
Okay. So I really liked the film. I liked the first film a lot. And I think I probably even liked the first film a little more than Joanna did. I also loved the second film. I wouldn't call it the greatest adaptation ever. I admire the aesthetic of it. I do think there are moments when spectacle trumps logical storytelling, and we can talk about those. But the spectacle is very compelling, obviously, and a lot of people are talking about the visuals, and rightly so, in this film. It is really quite cool, and I love the aesthetic that Denis Villeneuve was going for here. So overall, I really did like it. I think that Joanna's right. Actually, I'm going to really hard agree with Joanna about the film actually doing some things better than the book. One of them for me being Chani. I feel like Chani's character really is improved in the film over the book. Maybe slightly at the expense of Jessica, but I like what the film does. And I think the intention is, because Villeneuve is a fan of the series, the intention with the major change I feel in terms of the tone of what is essentially the first book in these two films is that you get a darker sense of Paul, of you get a sense of his the destruction that is going to result from him embracing this role. And I think that that's pulling probably from the second book in the series a little bit. So that's influencing the way he's telling this story. Oh, good. You changed your name. That's better. That's even better. Joanni. It's perfect.
I actually had a friend who used to call me that, so that's kind of perfect anyway.
Oh, yeah. Then that's really, yeah. So, yeah, I think that there are elements of the film that I think are better done than the original book. For me, at least they work better for me. And Chani's Exhibit A, but there are a few other things. And then there are things that I can nitpick for sure. And I guess we'll get into that later. But there are moments I'm like, come on, no. But that's me being persnickety is the word of the day. And in the moment and not allowing myself to, suspend my disbelief probably. But overall, I love the film. It was great.
John, what about you?
Well, I loved it. Maybe I got caught up a little bit in the spectacle as well, but I do think a lot of the smaller moments worked really well for me. I think having these two parts together now, you can see that Denny did a lot of the heavy lifting in the first movie to kind of set everything up to allow him to kind of go from the jump in the second movie. And I think that's what works so well for me. It's just how it just moves. Like, I think they're about the same length, but the second one feels so much shorter than the first one. And yeah, I thought it was amazing. I loved it.
Yeah, so things that I liked about the movie. So, to be fair, for the first movie, the first part, as you all might remember, I was really frustrated with how he portrayed Jessica. Justice for Lady Jessica. I'm still on that train, even through part 2. I had hopes that he was going to course correct and, establish some things to make me realize that, oh, this is what he was doing with Jessica before. But anyways, sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. What I did like about part 2 the visuals aspects of it, cinematography, wonderful. I actually like the not the composition or the music, but the sound itself. To I did watch part 1 at home. Part 2 is actually in the movie theater. So I think that also made a difference there for me, of just the experience of the theater and having like nicer sound systems, experiencing the film. And I like the action sequences. I'm not normally an action like driven reader, movie watcher, TV watcher, what have you. But the action scenes, particularly Feyd-Rautha's 2 scenes of his fight in the arena and his fight with Paul, absolutely fantastic. That is one thing for sure that I really like, is Austin Butler's Feyd-Rautha. He was terrifying. And then also the sandworms. The Paul riding the sandworm for the first time was truly breathtaking. Yeah. And I felt like I almost felt like I was there, like with the whole experience. And then them riding the sandworms into a raccoon, I'm like, yes, this is how I envisioned it. This is how I envisioned it in my head. But otherwise, I have frustrations.
Evie, could we talk about Paul riding the sandworm the first time? Because that's another moment I think is actually probably a little better in the film than it is in the book.
Yeah.
And I love not just the visuals there, which are stunning, but also the way in which Villeneuve has clearly, I feel anyway, and in that moment when Paul is riding this enormous creature, you also have the Fremen, especially Stilgar, but all the others are like Muad'Dib. It's this prophecies coming true, and it's a pivotal moment in Paul's development, because number one, he has this massive creature that he is. Oh, sorry, he has this massive creature that he is controlling with a couple hooks and ropes. And you have the sense that he's a tiny little fragile thing on top of this massive, powerful thing. And he's doing the same thing with the Fremen. In that moment, he is becoming the leader of the Fremen. He is becoming the Muad'Dib. He is wielding this vast power, which is a whole people. And I feel like it's a metaphor in a way, that the sandworm in that moment becomes, it is both literally happening, but it's also a beautiful metaphor for the role that Paul is stepping into of a prophet, of savior, of what have you. And I think that it's really beautifully linked there. Just, it's right in your face. And it's breathtaking. I wanted to stand up in the theater and scream Muad'Dib along with all the, along with the Fremen, and lose myself in that moment,
I'm so with you on that. And it's interesting to point out too, because I know Stilgar, I definitely want to talk about Stilgar a little bit in this discussion, if it's okay. But I felt as though, even though as much of a believer as he is in Paul being the Muad'Dib, I felt like a moment of doubt right before he went on the sandworm. He said, try not to show off. You don't have to do anything spectacular. I felt like fear in him. Like he needed this to be true, but at the same time, there was some doubt there. And I think that added to the tension there, that added to the intensity. And of course, we know he's going to succeed because we've read the book, but I love that scene. The way we talk about spectacle, I agree that maybe some spectacle, I can understand if that was the case, that it maybe took away from some logical storytelling in the movie. But I love the spectacle. I love the spectacle. And as much as I was a little critical about the soundtrack in movie 1, the soundtrack in movie 2 blew it out of the water for me personally. I left the theater and I just felt like suspended on this high, on this sandworm high in my brain. And I had the music just continuing to soar in my memory as I left the theater. So that was incredible. That was an absolutely incredible moment. I love what you were saying, Philip, about how that was him like wielding his power and wielding his influence over the Fremen specifically.
Yeah, I think that moment was really obviously make or break, not just for Paul's life, because if he failed, he's pretty much gonna die from the sandworm, but also it breaks Stilgar's faith, because he's so invested in Paul as the prophet, that if he dies, he hasn't achieved. They talk about like martyrdom towards the latter half of the film. He hasn't even gotten to that point where he is able to be a martyr, so he would die before he even is able to achieve anything, if that makes sense. And I think that's where Stilgar's fear comes into play in that moment. But
I'm trying to remember where in the movie, because I do remember there was a discussion, I think, with the emperor about we can't kill him at this point because then he would be a martyr.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember exactly when that was discussed. It was definitely before all the escalating, rising, falling action at the very end of the movie. But yeah,
I
I
think
mean, the stakes were still high at that point for sure for Paul.
yeah, I think it was after. I remember the scene very vividly in my mind. It's of Irulan with
Right.
the Reverend Mother, and she's like, "What if he's alive?" and what have you. I think it was after Gurney realizes that Paul's still alive. I think that was it.
Yeah,
Probably
possibly.
close. Anyway, yeah.
You watched it more recently than I did, so
Yeah.
rely
By
on
the
your
way,
memory.
for once, I was the one being like the straggler here. I most recently watched it on Friday, so y'all have been waiting for me.
That's okay.
But John, what about you? How did you feel about the thin worm?
I mean, obviously, visually, it was breathtaking, and I think it featured kind of there's like a theme of some of the shots of doing like close-ups on people's faces to show their reaction. Like Stilgar obviously had like a lot of ones that have made the rounds on the internet, and Chani had a lot. But I
All the
think
memes.
one very specific thing that I noticed that only because I had just reread the book recently was I didn't expect them to show this because I don't think it would have mattered either way. But they showed like why you have to use the hooks the way you do in order to ride the worms.
Peel the.
You have to like pull their scales up so they don't like dive under the sand. But and they didn't really outwardly explain that. They kind of just showed it. But I didn't expect that. I really didn't expect that to be in the movie. I thought that was cool that they just showed like a couple little shots of like the little like I guess like their softer kind of flesh underneath their scales. That's why they don't like dive when it's like open because the sand will like irritate it. Obviously, I thought that was cool. Just like a
Yeah,
nice little like
to
book
turn
detail
them
to
too,
include.
so the sand
Yeah.
doesn't get in as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think when it's like zoomed in on Paul and then it shoots out to like everybody reacting, that was like such a like thrilling high of like the movie, and everybody's cheering him on. Where they, I think that's when they finally are all like, okay, like we're believing in this guy now.
Yeah. Even Chani got excited in that moment, and she was resistant to seeing Paul as like this chosen one, Wadib. She didn't want to see him in that role, but even for her, it was just it was an impressive moment for everyone, and it was a big win for Paul overall.
Yeah, I feel like I guess we can talk about Chani in general.
Yeah.
I know, Philip, you already said that you really liked how they really enhanced and expanded upon and really, I don't know how to say this, but the depiction of Chani was different from in the book. It's much more
Vastly
complex.
different.
Yeah, vastly different. Debatably complex. I am conflicted on how they depicted her in the film. I like that she was the representative of just the antithesis of what Paul is becoming, of, you know, that she is the voice piece of, hey, he's not our savior, we can save ourselves as Fremen. But at the same time, like, compared to what she is in the book and what she does in later books, which Philip, I can't remember. Have you read Dune Messiah or Children of
No,
Dune?
I've only read Dune. Yeah.
Okay. So I won't say anything. It's just it from my understanding, I know Denis Villeneuve wants to do an adaptation of Dune Messiah. I don't know if he wants to do an adaptation of Children of Dune. But even if he just does Dune Messiah, I don't know how he's going to depict Chani
That is a
and
good question.
story and still be true true to the like faithful to Dune Messiah, not necessarily like accurate, like or perfect in the adaptation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my feeling, without obviously having read further in the series, is that Chani in Dune in the first book is almost an accessory to Paul, and in the film she's given life. She's much more complex. I agree with that, and I love how she's the one who questions and is the one who turns her back and leaves at the end when everyone else is basically given their will over to this savior figure. And I love that. And I think that that is the most significant change in the film that I can think of, is her character. I know Jessica is different too. Jessica is clearly more of a villain, I guess you could say, or has maybe more villainous edges to her in the film than in the book. Although I think ultimately she has the same motives. Initially, it's just survival, and then it's in the books too. Jessica knowingly, she chooses to give birth to a son with the intention of setting him up as the Kwisatz Haderach, right? So I mean, she's got that ambition in the book too. It's there. That's not coming out of nowhere. But with Chani, I feel like Denis Villeneuve is doing something different and is introducing a layer, much needed and interesting layer in this adaptation, in terms of the character herself, but also what she represents. It's not like all the Fremen are just mindlessly, bowing down and doing Paul's will. She represents that side, which is, hey, wait, what are we doing here? And there's going to be in any population people who have the guts to stand up and question, is this, wait, we're all rushing to war here. Are we doing this right? So I think that her voice is really important. I love that they gave her that. And yeah, some of it is personal at the end where Paul is essentially saying, I mean, that is the worst when he says to her, hey, no matter what happens, remember that I'll always love you. Right. And she's like, yeah,
so cheesy.
Okay. So like, Paul, you've lost it, here. And so it's personal. She gets slighted because Paul goes for the political union with Irulan there. And she's, but I don't think her motives are personal so much as she's concerned for her people. She's concerned for the future. She sees everybody giving up their minds to this guy who's now going to have incredible power, dangerous power. So I think that's really cool.
And I do appreciate that, it could have, what Denis Villeneuve, and I'd say this broadly because I'm sure it's the writers, the script writers, what have you, are also involved in this. So I say Villeneuve broadly to be applicable to all of them as a whole. I did appreciate that with the changes that they made to Chani, even though, I am conflicted about it, that her depiction wasn't just, the mouthpiece. There was actually world building built in to support her stances, where she talks about how the tribes in the south are more resistant to this idea of a messiah and a the Muad'Dib figure.
Isn't it the other way around?
Maybe the other way around. I
the
can't
South
remember.
was much more like a believer in religious.
Yeah.
They were more religious. Yeah.
That's right. Either way, there was that the difference between the two tribes that kind of was a backdrop to Chani's perspectives and what her resistance to Paul as this messianic figure. But anyways, John, what about you?
I thought Chani was the best character in the movie. Like not pretty easily, but definitely for me by the end. And definitely seeing it again, it cemented that. I thought, in many ways, she's like kind of like the heart of the movie, and she's kind of latched to Paul's kind of like fading humanity as we go, from beginning to end. And I think some of the scenes I thought that stick with me the most are just like the quiet ones with her and Paul where they're talking. And there's a scene towards, I guess it's around like the 2/3 point where Paul's like resistant to go south because he kind of sees like where that path leads.
Yeah.
And she's trying to get him, to like kind of go. And it was like that moment where they talked that you saw for both of them, that they saw that what they had is kind of like done, or in that form, it kind of broke right there. I thought that was like such a heartbreaking scene. Because like he's obviously seen it and he knows what's going to happen because he's like had his mind open, and she doesn't have that, but she's still like, like can see where that's going to lead. That's probably going to split them apart. And even if he's saying, like, I'll love you as long as I breathe, like I think she knows he's saying that just to kind of like placate her a little bit. And you see that as we get to the end where she's, obviously has like conflicting things she feels about Paul, but knows that he's kind of on a path that she can't really follow him down. I thought that was great. And then they had like some really good musical, like, notes with that one too that stuck with me. I think it actually has like a name. It's called like A Time of Quiet Between the Storms, which is their like kind of like the Paul and Cheney, like I guess theme score. I keep like humming that like same little like those like strings in my mind, like, all the time. It's so good. Just going back to like what Joanna said about some of the score in this was so good.
Yeah.
I personally love the changes with I always say Chani, but it probably is Cheney, huh? Anyhow, I thought it was I thought it was a really bold choice, obviously, to make her so different than she was in the book. And I know it leads a lot of questions to how is that going to transfer into another movie, especially with the ending scene with her. But at the same time, I like the choice a lot because if they had made Chani the way she is in the book for a movie in 2024, I just don't think that would have worked. It would have been kind of cringy, honestly. Like, so I think it actually worked really well, and I was so impressed with that actress. I'm terrible at following actors and actresses' names these days, but Zendaya, okay, yeah, Zendaya. But I was nervous. I was nervous about her before the movie because I knew she was going to be in the movie, and I kept seeing her on these red carpet events, looking very Hollywood elite. And I was like, I don't know. And then when I saw her in the movie, she killed it, in my opinion. I thought she was incredible. And I think the thing that was interesting to me, and a question I want to ask you all, was about the Fremen divide being so much more prominent in the movie than it was in the book. I mean, I understand that there were Fremen that were they weren't all on board, I guess, in the book. And you see that complexity more in the future books, perhaps. But like in the book, I mean, I don't think there was the North and South divisions. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there was the North and South
that either. Yeah.
divisions in book one.
In terms of the zealotry, you mean?
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Yeah, but what I found interesting, and I would just like to hear your thoughts about this, is that the scene where Chani is explaining this to Paul, and she's explaining, the South they're much more religious, and the North they're not so religious. And you see Stilgar, who's right there, and he's saying, look, the fact that he denies he's the Messiah makes him even more the Messiah. So when that moment happened, there was an outburst of laughter in the theater I was in. Like, people outwardly laughed at him. Like, he looked like a total goofy guy to people watching the movie, I guess. And I talked about that later with my husband, and he kind of had an issue with that. He said people laughed at that, and I got the sense people feel like they're above that. Like, they don't think that they would believe such a thing in this modern day. But he said that's something that still happens. Like, people still believe stuff. There are still zealots in the world. And I don't know. So I just wondered about that. If that maybe came across a little comical, and if that was intended to come across comical, or I don't know. Just wondered thoughts about that, because I thought he brought up a really interesting point. I don't know.
Well, I think even taking into account religion and non-religion stuff, like there's fanaticism and zealotry. Well, I guess zealots is just for religion, but there is that mentality, that level of rabidness in belief today, like now, like, so it's not like, I can see why it would be funny, but it's also very here and now. It's something that's universal, unfortunately. This idea of zealotry, fanaticism. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
So,
know.
go ahead, Evie.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I know John is, John, you've been sharing like memes and stuff from like Dune, and most of them, like you said, are from like you mentioned before, is from Stilgar. So
Yeah, that
right,
one facial expression is basically everywhere.
yeah, as it is written.
Yeah.
Well, that's a thing though, and as you've all observed, this is a phenomenon we see in our world, that people give themselves over to a faith, and that everything they encounter is confirmation of that faith, because they can just rejigger it, and interpret it according to their preconceived beliefs. That's certainly a thing. And Stilgar's moment for me that was even more interesting was when he's near the end, he's saying, "You have to kill me. You have to take my position here as a chief so you can talk here." And Paul's he takes charge there, and he actually he's reached a point where he's ready to say, "I'm going to change things. Yeah, I'm your Messiah figure, and from now on, this is how it's going to be. Why would you break your knife when you're about to go into battle?" Right? And he's basically he's changing things, and Stilgar's faith is so strong. He's ready to die for it. He's ready to be a martyr in that sense, and that's yeah. I mean, there you have innumerable examples of people whose devotion and faith have led them to a point where they believe that it is their duty and bliss even to die in the cause of their religion. For
Shout out to the Dan trilogy.
yeah.
Explores that quite a bit too.
Obviously, it's something I'm interested in too, because
And
I wrote about this in my own books. So yeah, I find him fascinating, and I don't think we need to. I don't think the film it is played a little bit for comedy, but I don't think the film is telling us, "Hey, what a dope," It's actually kind of beautiful. You can see it that way. I think the film leaves space for us to get goosebumps in those moments when when they see Paul ride the worm, or when Stilgar is ready to give his life. And it depends on your perspective. I think you can see it as frightening if you're a person who's inclined to see that kind of certainty as something that is dangerous, or you could see it as transcending and beautiful, because here all these people are so devoted to this cause and they have such pure faith. And I think the film leaves space for us to interpret it in multiple ways there.
And see, I think that that's also how the film succeeds in bringing forth the spirit of Dune, the book. I mean, it's
Yeah.
hard to reduce everything that Dune represents as a book form in its literary form into a movie form for sure. And I don't I'm never going to say not read the book, because there's always so much to the book, so many layers to the book that of course maybe can't be achieved in a film. But at the same time, like, I think the book is so powerful in showing the power of religion, whether you believe in it or not, and how that plays a role, and how, like, just the frightening things about leadership.
Yeah.
And the
That are
manipulation.
and the
In the
manipulation. And
in the
this is where I
guise of
had questions even as I was watching the movie, and it kind of helped actually to be a bit removed from the book, because as I was watching the movie, if you pay attention early on, when Jessica and Paul are talking, before Jessica is taken away to become the Reverend Mother, he's talking to her and he says, "All I have to do is sway the non-believers, and I could do
And
that."
she looks at the little kids, right? She's like targets the weak first, right?
Yeah, the target the weak, the vulnerable, the fearful, those who are fearful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I understand how she might seem like a villain in this book, in this movie, but I that's a hold on before we get to Jessica though. I just want to talk about Paul first though, because I think his motivations are really interesting, because it's not like you see that he certainly has some conflicted moments,
Yeah.
but I think he's still on the same page with wanting to take on that role from the beginning. Um, and I did feel like he kind of played Tawny, in a sense. Like, he might have really cared about Tawny. I think that comes through, but I think he played her. He thought he knew better, and that's kind of also the problem with Paul. Like, Paul is very fallible, and I think that he sees and I got the sense, and I don't know if you all saw it this way or if maybe this was short-sighted on my part, but I got the sense that when he saw his vision of the future, when he started to see things more into the future and the possible paths with the prescience gift that he has, and with the water and everything, and the reawakening and recoming to life, I feel like he saw a path forward that at first he sees a path forward that's only tragic for Chani and him, and for Chani's death. But then when he sees it later, I think that he still sees a possibility for them to be together, and that was why he had faith in taking the emperor's daughter's hand and saying, Tawny, she'll come around, basically. Like, she'll come around. And I agree that the dialogue is a bit cringy, Philip, that you brought up at the end. But I still think that maybe that was part of his confidence, was that she would come around. And that was where I was thinking, okay, so at the end of the movie, we see Chani riding the sandworm, and it looks like maybe she's going to lead maybe a faction against Paul or something like that. But at the same time, I also thought, is she just going to come around if they do a third movie? Like, if they do another movie, are they going to make it so she comes around pretty quickly because Paul saw that? That was where I had questions.
And that's where I'm nervous about, because if they were just set this up as just Dune, I think I would have been like, okay, it's still not great, like, still not happy, but I could accept it. But with the idea, with the knowledge that they would like to do a third Dune movie for Dune Messiah, I'm like, are they going to completely change Dune Messiah? Like, it doesn't, like, it's not clicking in my brain. But anyways, John, what about you? What are your thoughts? Paul?
I think, like, obviously originally Paul's motivations are that he wants to kind of utilize the Fremen to, like, help him get revenge. I mean, it's kind of shown, early on. Jessica says your father didn't believe in revenge. He says, well, I do. And that was it. Like, he just basically made it clear cut that he wants to fight with the Fremen to take back, like, Arakeen and take back Arrakis from the Harkonnens and from, the factions that are trying to, keep him down. But I think kind of as he, is among them, he kind of sees the different paths that if he does this a certain way, obviously it's going to go down a path that he can't really, like, kind of control anymore almost. I think it's super interesting. I mean, the book's a little more subtle about it, where I think the movie is a little more, it kind of strips a little of the subtlety away, where you see, like, yeah, like, if I become this, Messiah to them, even though I know that having the mother who's a Bene Gesserit, that it's basically, the prophecy is just, almost like spread propaganda, that I'm basically just, like, playing into something that's not even really, real outside of, like, the Fremen culture. But I just thought that was super interesting. I thought Paul was so complex in this movie. It was great. And Timothy Chalamet did a great job of showing Paul's kind of descent a little bit into that kind of villain or anti-hero or whatever you want to call him role that he kind of seems like he's going into. He was really commanding with it at the end.
Yeah.
I think you pinpointed my biggest frustration with Paul as a character in part 2 is that they make him much more active in his ascension and what do you call it? Basically, much more active in his manipulation of the Fremen. Whereas in the book, I feel like he was much more passive. Like, he still, was like, okay, I'll play into this whole Messiah thing. But it felt much more, like you said, John, subtle in the book. And it's just more, I don't want to say that Denis Villeneuve didn't trust the audience, but it's well, obviously obvious that he wanted to make it clear that Paul is, as Herbert intended, a charismatic leader, and he wanted to make that charismatic leader very vocal and very active, whereas I think for me the subtlety and the passivity would have still been effective, and it's still a trait of a charismatic leader. Like, you don't have to be outspoken or, like, so vocal from the beginning. It's that subtle, like, that ascension, that slow influence until you get to the, I don't know, the the point where you want. I don't know what I was trying to say there, but Paul, his manipulation of the Fremen is really based in Jessica, which I know, Joanna, you wanted to talk about Jessica. I have thoughts
Before
on
we
Jessica.
go there, though, I just want to say I really loved Paul in the movie. I think that actor, Timothée, whatever his last name is, sorry, I'm so bad at actor names.
Chalamet.
Thank you. I'm so bad at actor names. I'm even worse with character names, but I loved him. And I was also skeptical about him in the first movie. I was like, he's okay. And then in the second movie, I thought, oh, he was amazing. And I think that you're right, Evie, that maybe he's a little more overt in his charismatic manipulation, if you will. But I think that the film, it needs to be that way on film, in my opinion. You don't get the subtext that you do written out the way Herbert does in a book on film. So, and it's not even obvious to most people that Paul's bad when they read Dune. And that's why a lot of people, I mean, there's so many jokes about that. I know Matt on Books in our Discord, the Fireside Discord, he's been posting like some funny memes of like Dune, Paul is bad, Paul is bad. And then Dune Messiah, like, no, really, Paul is bad. Like some things to make sure that Dune Messiah makes it really obvious. Whereas Dune, it's easy to miss that. And it's easy to miss too that Paul's expendable too. And I feel like the movie makes that clear too, with the way that, and I'm going to forget the characters' names now, but the way the Bene Gesserit sister tries to manipulate.
Margot Finrey, Lady Margot.
Lady Margot. Thank you. Yeah.
The way she manipulates
Fade. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that made it really obvious too. I mean, that's in the book, but is it in Dune or is it in Dune Messiah? And that's where I get things blurred together. So I'm sorry.
It's in Dune.
Okay.
It's in Dune.
Yeah. So I think some of the things had to be a little bit more clear on film, on screen, than maybe in the book. But I still think I still think it's an intelligent movie. I still think you have to pay attention to follow what's happening and to understand it.
I think they do a great job. They do a really great job of where they can nodding to the books. You can tell that Denis Villeneuve is a fan of the books. Like he does little things, like he has Irulan a couple times. You see her transcribing or whatever on that roll, and that's a nod to the epigraphs, which I thought was really cool. All these little gestures, they're all over the film, which I think should appease many fans, not all necessarily. Evie,
and also I want to say really quickly about the end of the movie and the question about Dune Messiah, the third film, if they make one. I know that I heard that a rumor that the director is writing a script, but we don't know for sure if that's been approved or not. But I actually, so my one criticism when I read Dune the first time and the second time, because the first time I read Dune, I remember thinking, I think this is possibly my favorite book I've ever read. Like I loved it that much. But then I got to the end and I felt so unsatisfied.
Oh, sure.
And I understand that the book was originally intended as a standalone, but I never felt satisfied with it as a standalone. And when I read it the second time, I felt the same way. And I feel much more satisfied with the story overall, having read Dune Messiah and having read Children of Dune. I still love Dune, the first book, better than Dune Messiah and Children of Dune, but I love the sequels, those two sequels. And I feel like they complete an arc and they actually made me love the first book even more. So I loved it, but it didn't feel like it was very conclusive or satisfying of an ending for me. And I feel like if we had ended it, there were some changes that happened at the end, but I feel like they got to the end of the book for the most part. And I actually think in some ways it was a bit of a stronger ending, even though it does seem open-ended. It does seem like a cliffhanger. I actually really liked it.
I think the ending was pretty faithful, like to the page of the book. So,
but we get a bigger sense of conflict, the imminent holy war, and everything that's about to blow. Things are about to hit the fan here, and that's and that you don't get in the book, but you feel this sense of doom at the end of the second film.
Yeah. Yeah, the book almost feels to me like it lacks, it doesn't feel very climactic, whereas the
Mm.
movie was really climactic. It was very exciting. I don't know, maybe some of that was just seeing it on screen too, but I agree. I mean, we got to the end of the book, and I was surprised by that because I have another friend who actually is also very critical of the movie, Evie. I think I have a friend who's also has very similar criticisms to you. I don't want to call them out in case they don't want to be called out. But
New best friend.
yeah,
Joanna's friend, you're my new best friend.
yeah. But they told me before I went into the movie, that was also why my expectations were a bit low because they said the movie pulls a Hobbit, is what the person said. In the sense that like the movie The Hobbit, where you like you have an extra need for an extra film or something along those lines. I'm like, so I wasn't expecting us to actually get to the end of the film. I was thinking, okay, then maybe we're gonna leave more film for Dune Part 3 for the book, and that wasn't the case at all. We actually got to the end of the book. Anyhow, sorry. More thoughts from you all.
Yeah, I think it's sorry, I was just gonna say that one thing that I now thinking about it for the past, day and a half, 2 days, is that because Denis Villeneuve didn't do the 2-year time jump, the same in the book, like that necessitated made it necessary. Yes, there you go. Made it necessary. I can't even say that word. For a lot of the changes, and so it's like, it's about so.
That's why no Aaliyah, obviously, because they compressed the time in the film. Yeah.
Which I think is fine. I actually was okay with Aaliyah not being in the film, especially seeing some like cut films of some cut scenes of and I love Aaliyah. Don't get me wrong. Aaliyah was amazing. Aaliyah was very special for me, especially in the later books, Dune Messiah and Children of Dune. But I think that the thing is, like, whenever I see some of the scenes of Aaliyah, the child actress, in some of the earlier adaptations, it just looks so bad.
Yeah, it's really cringy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that they actually were very intelligent the way that they had her as like they showed images of her as an adult, but made it clear she was speaking through the womb. And I thought that was very clever. And I thought it worked really well for the movie.
So I think without spoiling Philip, and John, you've read all the books, right? Or have you only read
just Dune?
Okay. Also, to not spoil John, the choice they made with Aaliyah, however you say your name, I've always said Aaliyah. I don't know why.
Yeah,
but,
I don't know how to say it. You might be right.
Yeah, you might be right.
It's a book. There's no pronunciation guide. But the decision that Villeneuve made, particularly with the death of Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, making Paul kill him instead of in the book,
right.
Aaliyah. That, I mean, I'm pretty sure he has no intention of adapting Children of Dune. Bless you. I'm pretty sure he has no intention of adapting it, but still, it's just something. Oh, you're just like, that's like integral to Aaliyah as a character. But that's just me being nitpicky and persnickety, to bring that word up again. But a good segue to Jessica. So I was frustrated so much with Jessica in the first film. I'm like, but I had hopes. I'm like, maybe she'll be corrected. There'll be a course correction and I will love her and I will understand why he made the choices he made in part 1. In part 1, my frustration, they made her very weepy. Crying all the time, very emotional. In this part 2, they made her seem mad, as in like crazy, instead of deliberate and calculating in her manipulation. They just made her seem like she was, well, like you guys have said, the archetypal villain.
I
And I'm
didn't
like,
see her that way though. I didn't. One, I didn't see her as crazy, and two, I did not see her as. I know people. I can understand seeing her as kind of a villain, but I didn't necessarily see her as a villain either. I don't know if it's just me, but just want to say that.
I feel like she was leaning into a role, right? Knowingly, like saying to Aaliyah, "Hey, we gotta get the weak ones here. We gotta get them first." Very strategic, but that she, even with the tattoos across her face and everything, she's leaning into this role that she's now taken on in order to pave the way. She's Paul's John the Baptist here, right? I mean, she's trying to pave the way for Paul to become the Messiah, and she's doing whatever it takes, and I think that she's very in touch with her sanity in the process, but that she is portraying this matriarchal role in order to bring about the larger goal. That's, at least that was how I saw her character.
And she said she didn't have a choice. I mean, at the beginning, what's his name that I'm already blanking on? Tells her
Stilgar?
what? Is Stilgar?
Stilgar?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He tells her, it's this or die. She didn't have much of a choice. She even joked about it to Paul.
Water of life, or you can be killed,
Yeah. To me, and it makes sense with her Bene Gesserit training and the whole no fear thing. Like, she becomes really zoomed in on, this is the one path I'm given. This is the one chance for my son. This is it. And she just leans into it. Like you said, Philip, like she leans into that role. And for me, I felt it and I loved it. Jessica is very near and dear to my heart in the books. And I understand it's a different portrayal of this character, but I loved her. I felt it, and I think that the sound effects with her voice just it gave me chills. I loved it so much.
I think the kind of the additional frustration is that, like, in part one, they made Paul seem like it was his idea to be manipulative of the Fremen and be that Messiah figure, where it's always been her. And in the second one, I feel like they tried to make her seem like she was more active, but they actually made it seem like it was Alia's idea. Maybe that was just my perception, and I went in as a bad faith viewer of the film, already ready to hate it, and hate their perceptions of or depictions of Jessica. But it made it feel like, because she kept talking to Alia in the womb, and everyone's looking at her like, oh my god, she's crazy. All the Fremen, and talking to Alia like, oh, you have to do that, have to make this decision, so that made it seem like, I don't know, like it was more Alia's idea, which maybe that'll be the new arc of Alia, and I don't know. But anyways, John, what were your thoughts on Jessica and or Alia?
I took Jessica as she knew exactly what she was doing the entire time. I thought that she was I think a very visual way that they showed it was the way that she dresses up in all the elaborate clothing and puts the tattoos on. I thought that was a very deliberate choice of kind of it's called cultural appropriation, where you're she's obviously not of the Fremen culture, but she's wearing these big elaborate outfits and the headdresses and the tattoos and stuff. And I think that was part of what you guys said, of her playing this role where she's playing into the manipulation of the weaker ones and getting the ones that are easy to manipulate first, and then building up this sort of this broader, what do you want to call it, where she's getting gathering a larger group of the Fremen to kind of be on Paul's side eventually. I thought that was the way they showed that was really clever, because it wasn't very, it's obviously that part's not very subtle, where she's all of a sudden has this very stern look, and she's playing this commanding Reverend Mother figure. I thought that was really cool the way they showed that, when the people were obviously very terrified of her, because she's talking to herself, and they don't know that she's talking to her unborn child, but we do. But I thought that was a cool kind of the way they showed that.
I felt like the scene where she's drinking the water of life, you could tell the actress, the way she portrays that scene. It's almost like a woman going through labor or something. And she's just bracing herself, I'm not going to fear this. Like, and you could tell it's like a fight, an internal fight in her. And she really hones in on finding that control and finding that way forward. And I also thought it was, I think that there's a really good point that you have though, Evie. I think it's hard for me to say now because I feel like in addition to being a little further away from the book, I also feel as you pointed out at the beginning of this, that it's been a while since I saw Dune 1 because we talked about this like over a year ago. So it's a little harder for me to remember exactly how she was portrayed in Dune 1. However, I do see in this movie that she was instrumental in pushing Paul down that path. I really liked that scene at the end when he's in front of all the Fremen and he's trying to do his last move to get all the Fremen on his side. And she tells him in her mind, she's like, easy now, don't go so hard. And he does go pretty hard and it works. But
he does the complete opposite of what you were saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
As what I imagine any child with a parent would do. Do the complete opposite of what they tell you to do.
I like that. Yeah.
I think also like the water of life scene is kind of interesting because when she's like basically like, you know, in like I guess like a comatose state, Paul's even like, she's like a Bene Gesserit. She can do like, what's it called? Like poison, whatever.
Poison manipulation. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, she's going to be fine. Like she knows what she's doing. Like she knew what she was doing the whole time, I think. They didn't know that, but Paul knows all the Bene Gesserit, you know, like stuff that she's been teaching him throughout his life.
Right. But
like,
she was pregnant.
She can just pull the poison out when, you know, at any point. So
yeah, but it was a whole other. The stakes are raised so much when she's pregnant, you know, and I think they show that struggle with that. And I mean, this is what the consciousness of thousands of years of motherhood going into her at once and into this womb at one time. And it's unreal. It's hard to fathom what that's doing.
Yeah, and then there's the other water of life scene of Paul taking the water. And another significant change is having Chani give the water of life to him, and that's the thing that brings him back rather than him doing that the chemical like manipulation to like modify his genes or something like that, or bloodstream, whatever that was. I did think that was interesting.
Yeah
she's simultaneously like playing into his legend or his him being a figurehead while still like being resistant to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think, I mean, obviously it was a reluctant role on Chani's part, but it also made me feel like she was, I don't know. It's so complicated. I love how complicated the dynamic was between Chani and Paul because it constantly, as just trying to watch the movie with fresh eyes, it just constantly had me guessing, is Paul just using Chani, but he still cares about her, but he's still using her? And it just got so sticky, all those layers.
I will say, just from an aside, I like Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya as individual actors. I initially had frustrations with Zendaya. I'm like, she has, like, everyone else has an accent in the Fremen culture except for her. She just sounds like Zendaya being Zendaya. And then I realized her parent is supposed to be, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name, Liet Kynes, who is not Fremen. So I'm like, okay, I can justify that. That's fine. I get it. So them individually as characters, great. Love them. Awesome. Their chemistry together, they got chemistry of a wet blanket in my eyes. So like, I did not believe their connection, like their attraction to one another. It just, you know, the intimate scenes, I'm just like, oh, really? Like, I don't believe you two together. So anyways, that's an aside. I'm sorry.
We're going to talk about that knife fight at the end.
Yes.
Yeah. We should talk about Fade Rafa in general. I feel like
we haven't
gotten to him yet. One of the other best parts of the movie.
Loved it. Loved that imagery. The black and white arena, that whole scene.
The fact that it's not like an actual like random choice to make it black and white, the fact that it's like world building of Yeti Prime that it's black and white, I thought was insanely cool.
I heard about
Yeah.
that after the fact. I was aware. That's another thing. I'm like, but I
Well, they
love the thought
kind
that
of
went into that.
established it more like it was more like silvery, like in the
Yeah.
first film, right? When they did show Getty Prime, and then now it's like just more.
I don't know if they ever showed stuff like outside though. Did they very often? I can't remember.
Didn't they show
So
the
when they're
solder
inside,
pack?
they're like they have obviously more like the regular like color
Yeah.
kind of palette,
And
but
I heard that they took some inspiration from H.R. Geiger's art, which makes so much sense. If you all are familiar with H.R. Geiger's art, he's the artist who did a lot of the conception for the movie Alien, the one with Sigourney Weaver
that make
back in the day.
that does a lot of alien vibes with
Really
some of the inside
dark.
like
Yeah. It's very, very dark. And it really came through. I loved it. Brilliant. And I think that character is probably very different than the books, I'm gonna imagine. I don't remember him very well from the book.
One thing I can tell you though about Getty Prime, there are no hairdressers there.
They are the boldest people who have ever been bold.
What happened to all the redheaded Harkonnens?
Yeah,
I know.
Right.
I think it works for the movie. Like aesthetically,
Yeah.
they're like how they look is very stark, different from everybody else.
And it made them like, well, it made Fade Ratha even more terrifying.
It was
Like
terrifying.
no body hair or whatsoever, and the black teeth. I don't remember if that was that definitely wasn't in the book, but just Austin Butler is Fade Ratha. Like I'm so glad that he's getting like serious roles, because he is such a wonderful actor.
I really think the acting was next level in this film. All of the acting was really, really good, in my opinion. I loved the scene with the Bene Gesserit. I think I already mentioned this, but the Bene Gesserit woman who came to manipulate him, and I forgot her name again.
Helen Moyahim. Oh God, Helen Moyahim something.
All right, but that scene was pretty spectacular because I feel like the Bene Gesserit showed themselves to be so powerful in this film.
Yeah.
And I love that because I feel like you get a sense of that in the book for sure, but I feel like it came through in the movie to a new degree.
I mean, here you have this sociopath who's already been shown to be vicious in this really cool kind of chiaroscuro aesthetic scene with the, it's really awesome. But then he's kind of, essentially controlled by this Bene Gesserit who he's kind of like a puppy, and she's says, is initially just following him. He's like, "Who are you?" And then suddenly he's like, "Where am I?" And she's like, "Come on, or you're in my room now,"
Yes.
So he's totally played by her. Yeah. And that is kind of creepy and eerie how powerful they are. But also how they're doing their thing. They're manipulating in order to do their big plan, right? And they're having these, just in case this fails, we'll have this, and this ready. They've got their plan B, C, D, and E, waiting. So yeah,
which adds to Jessica's manipulation of the Fremen, because that's not just the Bene Gesserit have been manipulating the Fremen for millennia, because the Fremen religion is just an offshoot of, or really a plant of the Bene Gesserit beliefs of the Quasi Terrarak or whatever. So
yeah, I mean it's fascinating too, because I feel like I've heard the one criticism I have heard around online is that people were not really buying Christopher Walken, is that his name, as Amber, yeah. And I mean, I think that's actually a very valid criticism, because he does seem like, and maybe that's true to the book. I don't remember, but he does seem kind of weak. He does seem like, I didn't feel much tension, even when he's telling Paul that like his father was weak. There was a little bit of tension there, but I still feel like it could have been for like more amped up. But the Bene Gesserit, they seem like the real, I don't know, the real strong ones in the book. I mean, in the movie, they seem like the ones you don't want to mess with, even more than him. So,
to be fair, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, the Emperor was supposed to be like super old in the book. So
He
I
is
think.
killed by Aaliyah. I don't know.
Oh, wait, was the Emperor killed by Ali, or was it just the Baron Harkonnen?
Oh no, it was Baron
I thought
Harkonnen. I'm so sorry. You're right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I actually liked Christopher Walken as the Emperor. You know, because I didn't really have any preconceived. I think that's my problem, is I have a lot of preconceived notions about characters, and the Emperor was not one that I had like.
I
them
didn't
built up
either.
in
I didn't really
Pretty
have a
small
lot.
role in the book, anyway.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't remember him that much in the book, so that wasn't really a big nitpick for me. I just know that he did seem kind of like a weaker character when you contrast him to the Bene Gesserit.
Yeah.
And even Harkonnen, Baron Harkonnen, like he seemed to have a lot less time in the movie. It seemed to me than I was expecting. But I wasn't.
And
I think
I will
that was.
forgive that because they focused on Feyd-Rautha, so
I think
I
so.
will forgive
And
that.
yes, I think that was actually a smart move. I actually preferred the Fade over the Baron Harkonnen.
Anyways, you were going to say something,
Spotlight.
Philip. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Oh, was I? I don't know. Let's talk about the knife fight.
Oh, so good.
Okay.
I mean, the aesthetics awesome. I honestly, that was one of the moments where I was, come on, because Paul gets stabbed in the guts, okay, and then he's stabbed again when he does his little, okay, we're gonna hug here, and we're gonna stab each other, but I'm gonna stab you worse than me. I honestly don't think that that's extremely realistic. And then afterwards, he's like, okay, let's make wedding plans, and you've been stabbed, man. You should be dead.
Yeah, that was a bit confusing.
Yeah,
That
I
was a little bit confusing. The choreography was stunning, though.
Brilliant. Yeah.
But you're right. It was hard to suspend your disbelief when it's like, he really did seem like he was stabbed there. And he seemed to be doing okay, which is,
Yeah.
I don't know how that worked.
That part had me kind of. Now, I do have a cousin who was stabbed in a bar and beat the guy up who stabbed him. So I guess it's possible. Yeah.
The adrenaline, I
Wow.
suppose. So,
I mean, I guess you could suspend your disbelief a little bit and say Paul has incredible training. He's had incredible training his
Yeah.
whole life, but still, it was a weird.
and also on the
weird
flip
one.
side, like they kind of, if you consider that, they kind of preemptively prepped it. They set expectations with Feyd-Rautha that during his birthday fight thing, that everyone else was supposed to be drugged, which in the book everyone was drugged so that he could guarantee to be, to win and not be injured. And he still wins the fight against what's his face? Oh my gosh, the guy who betrayed them.
Oh, Doctor
Yue.
Anyway.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Which, by the way, I didn't anticipate that in the second film. I was like, oh, I forgot about that guy. I'm glad they included him in here.
Was that Yue?
Yeah.
I didn't think that was Yue. I thought that was just some guy.
Just
Yeah, it was Yue.
I thought it was like they just have like some leftovers of the Atreides. I didn't think that was Yue though. Because I thought Yue died.
Maybe we should double check. I thought Yue dies.
They killed
in the
Yue
first
in the first
movie.
movie. He said,
I mean,
"Join
he
your
dies
wife" or whatever,
different-
and he kills him.
Yeah.
I think that was just
That
like
sounds
some
you might be
people
right.
like left over who served the Atreides.
I'll look it up.
All right.
I thought in the book that they also left like one person undrugged.
They did.
Trap that the Baron set for Feyd-Rautha as a kind of a test, you mean? Or
Yeah, I thought in both the movie and the book they left one person undrugged.
They
As sort of a
did.
plan within plan.
I thought that was the Fenray. It wasn't Lady Margot. It was her husband, the Count.
Who's not
Count
in the film.
Fenray.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think so. That was interesting. How it's like a plan within the plan of
I thought
well, if he is with this guy, then
died in the first film too.
I think he does die in the first film. Yeah. It says here, I don't know if this is the right. Anyway, we can look it up later and try to clarify that.
If somebody's asking this question somewhere, yeah.
I think the Baron says like, "Oh, I promised you could join your wife," and his wife's dead, so he's like, "So now you can join her," and he just like kills him.
That's right. Yes, that is what happens. I know that
I
definitely.
forgot
I
about
want to
that.
say that definitely happens.
Yeah.
Totally forgot about that.
I guess we have to go
Whoopsies.
watch the first film again.
I know.
There were
I
some
do
good
wonder
parallels
about
to
that. I
the
feel
first
like
movie.
this. I think that also might make a difference in how we perceive Dune 2. I wonder if it would have. I feel like I did a disservice to this discussion by not rewatching Dune 1 before watching Dune 2. Because I think if you watch them both back to back, I'm sure we could see a more complete picture of what the director was going for. I don't know.
There's a lot of
To
parallels to the first
also,
one.
I was gonna say I didn't watch Dune Part 1 in before watching Dune Part 2. So I will also probably, well, I'm not gonna do it like right now. I'll wait until it comes out on DVD or something. But because I other than watching it at home, I don't think I rewatched Dune Part 1 either. Like ever. Like I haven't watched it again since that first time.
I haven't.
Uh,
No.
Same here. Yeah.
I watched it
And I
like
watched it, and
they reissued
I
it in
didn't.
theaters. I went with my mom and watched it again
Yeah.
like a couple weeks ago.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah, I really did a disservice to myself by not watching Dune 1 in theaters. I watched it at home on HBO at the time. And,
it was during COVID. We all had an
yeah,
excuse. So
yeah. I'm sure I would have enjoyed it more in a theater though, honestly. But this one I did see in the theater, and I have to say, even when I watched it, I was very sleep deprived when I watched it, and I was so scared I was gonna fall asleep because I was just exhausted that day, and it was a really long movie, and I think by virtue of the fact that it was so good, I stayed awake. On any other day, I mean, if it were any other movie, if it were less good, I would have fallen asleep. So, it kept me engaged. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about, Evie? Any specific moment?
sorry, I got distracted. I'm like, who is this other character supposed to be? Because I could have swore it was supposed to be Dr. Yue.
Oh yeah, we
Anyways,
can look that up. Let's see.
no,
Maybe
no,
if
no.
we look it
I'll
up,
do it after. I'll do it after. I
put it
obviously
on the screen because yeah.
but no. So it's yeah. I guess like if I was gonna say if they make Dune Part 3 / Dune Messiah, what would you hope? But then I realized, John and Philip, you haven't read Dune Messiah, so you have homework. So
Okay.
Messiah.
I actually have ordered it, so I'm on it.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm planning to.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess my final thoughts is I was initially enraged after seeing this film, as John can attest. But the thinking about it, reflecting on it, and discussing it with you guys, like I'm less enraged and more just, I wouldn't say disappointed, but like I understand the changes that were made, even though I'm not particularly supportive of them, if that makes sense. So, yeah. But anyways, final thoughts on the film. Like, I don't know, does Denis Villeneuve have any films coming out? Like, because I would watch another film that he directs, that's for sure.
I don't
I think he's
know.
working on Cleopatra maybe.
Oh,
Excuse me? Really?
I think that's one of the ones he wants to do. Yeah. I don't
I
think
could
he has
already
anything
hear
imminent.
Alan
I think he's
ranting about that.
yeah.
Uh-oh.
I think he's going.
Yeah.
He's trying to work on Dune 3 for a few years down the road. But yeah.
Alan is always saying that Cleopatra is overrated and that the story between Anthony and Cleopatra isn't that exciting.
Is it Denis Villeneuve, or is it another director also wants to do Rendezvous with Rama?
I think it's Denis Villeneuve.
Okay. That'd be cool. I will say
didn't know
that you can tell that Denis Villeneuve loves Dune, and has a passion particularly for sci-fi, because with Arrival, like that's one of my favorite films of all time, and he that's an adaptation that I'm like, I have no problems with this adaptation compared to the source material. You can tell he has a passion for sci-fi, and that's something that is, I think, is underrepresented in Hollywood, is just sci-fi films to this level of prestige. Yeah, so yeah, maybe another almost 2 years down the road, we'll regroup for Dune Part 3.
Yay. I'm so excited. I just loved my experience so much with Dune 2. Like I said, it surpassed every expectation I had. I had a great time. I think that even though it does leave some questions as to what would a third movie be like, I have trust in this director now because that's how much I loved Dune 2. So I have trust that the third movie, if it comes out, if there is one, will be fantastic.
I also think it's just great for fantasy sci-fi in general that you have a big win here. And we've had a few adaptations that fans of books have been upset about in the last few years, and
You know what time?
Yeah, we won't get into those, but this is huge. This is a win for all of fantasy and sci-fi, in my opinion.
Oh, I totally agree with that. I think that if it brings more people into fantasy and sci-fi, then all the better. And I think that there's a hunger for that right now. I really do. I think that the success of the movie is nothing but a great thing for the genre and for reading in general.
Final thoughts, John?
I think the main thing about it that makes this movie work is Denny, along with maybe a Christopher Nolan, are so good at making these movies feel so big and so grand and so epic, and it's just that's just kind of what part of his style that just sweeps me away when I watch his movies is I feel like I'm part of this huge enormous thing that's it's almost mind-boggling how they even make stuff like this for and it doesn't take 50 years to make or something. It's crazy to me just watching this kind of style at work. And yeah, I think he did do a great job adapting it the way that he saw fit, where he had to kind of maybe strip some subtlety away and move some things around. But I don't think there's anything in it, to me personally, that's egregiously out of place. And I think like I said, clearly people are going crazy for it and also are going to see it. I mean, it's on pace to make a lot of money, and so I think that's great. That we get more movies like this that feel like true event films that people are enjoying. So yeah, that I consider that a home run.
Yeah, you got me out of my hermit cave. So
hey. Same here. And I think that there's something to be said for the spectacle. As much as we want people who see this movie to really take in the themes of Dune, which are important, of course, the spectacle, I would argue, is very important as well. It's part of the success of Dune, is the feeling of how big and transcendent that book felt, and how macro and micro it goes. And I think that the movie captures that with the spectacle. I think it's very important, honestly.
Yeah, I think it does really. I think he balanced the adaptation and staying honoring the fans of the source material while still making it accessible to anyone that hasn't read the source material. I think he did that well. So
it's important. Yeah, because I don't think that movies and adaptations should just be for the readers, in my opinion. It should be open for everyone.
Yeah.
So I love that.
I'm still waiting for that Jodorowsky adaptation, but
is Evie
any final
frozen?
thoughts? Evie, are you frozen?
I think she's frozen.
Oh no.
Looking very contemplative, but
Wait.
Well, final thoughts. Evie, while you're frozen, I'd like to thank you for organizing this discussion and getting us together. It's been really a pleasure. And in fact, I will say, while you're probably not even able to hear me, you were remarkably restrained in the discussion. I appreciate your allowing us to gush a little bit here and there. And you were a good voice in this discussion. So
yes. Oh no.
And then we'll just have to keep
captured by the Benny Gesserit.
Yeah.
I actually can technically end the stream, but I won't. I'll wait. Oh, looks like she's coming back.
There she is.
Okay, I don't know. This is the second time this has happened when I've been on a stream that it's just completely booped out on me. So I'm so sorry. Yes, so I will make sure to download this video and edit that out and repost this. It's fine. But yeah, so
we made the best of it. We were just talking about you while you were gone.
okay.
We were saying good things about you.
It was fine. It's fine. And my ears were burning. But yeah, so thank you so much for joining. Hopefully we can discuss not just Dune Part 3 in the future, but maybe another film adaptation in the nearer future.
Twisters.
Don't get me started on Twisters. Oh god, it's fine. R.I.P. Bill Paxton. Anyways, yeah, so thank you again. I will leave a link down below to all of these wonderful folks' channels, and by all of them I mean Joanna and Philip. John, we'll get you a channel soon, one day. Yeah, and I'll leave a link down below to Dune Parts 1 discussions, as well as the Green Knight discussion that John and Philip and I had as well. And yeah, I don't know how to sign off on these things, so I'm going to officially end the stream before my internet craps out again.